Achilles, Legends Untold puts the early in early access. Across the board, this action RPG is full of ideas that feel they are still an epic journey away from being ready. Combat, which has Souls-like ambitions, is competent but a bit flat. The first stage of this world looks good and is full of monsters to kill, but devoid of things worth exploring. The story is trivial and its characters are rote, and it has more than its fair share of bugs. In its current state, there's nothing legendary to talk about. One imaginative addition to the myth of Achilles is that after being slain by an arrow, our titular demigod is returned to life by Hades to seek revenge and do his bidding. Familiar characters, like King Agamemnon, meet the freshly undead Achilles and aren't always happy to see him.
You're dead, so go back to the realm of the dead and never return, Wraith!
It's a good start, but much of the dialogue is utterly underwhelming, and the other characters so far are forgettable.
I warned the traveler. Now I must call on my blade.
From there, there's a bunch of running from dungeon to dungeon, gathering doodads for so-and-sos, all in pursuit of Hades' big plan to restore the connection between Greece and the underworld. That takes about 5 hours to hit the current finish line. But doing so is more inconvenient than it needs to be because without a minimap, it's incredibly easy to get lost on the way to the next dungeon. You can eventually fast travel between shrines, but because there isn't a proper world map either, it's impossible to know where they are in relation to each other. As an example of the trouble this causes, when you first begin your adventure, you unlock a forge that's supposed to be your early go-to location for upgrading and buying equipment, but you can't teleport to it. So until you memorized exactly where it is, among a lot of samey-looking ruins and rocks, you can expect to spend more time searching for it than engaging with any of the crafting. This confusion can go double for dungeons. The second one, the Temple of Cronus, changes its layout slightly every time you die. That's a maddening and cruel penalty that makes what should be a simple restart take so much longer, again because there's no map or wayfinding system of any sort to guide you. Contemporary games with randomized dungeons are almost always a linear path from one room to the next, or at least have tools for finding your way through. You don't know how much you'll miss those until they're gone. The lack of direction is a side effect of the fact that the countryside between dungeons is surprisingly large, full of pretty scenery and diverse locations like rugged mountains, dark temples, and rolling hills. But it's also devoid of anything worth walking off the beaten path to discover. Maybe it's expecting too much of a modest game like Achilles, but this many years after games like The Witcher 3 and Breath of the Wild stoked our urge to explore by filling their massive open worlds with points of interest like elaborate side quests or puzzle dungeons, these vast stretches of land with little to do but farm loot are disappointing. That might be one thing if you have an exciting loot system, but right now, Achilles does not. Other than swords, bigger swords, spears and shields, many items you find are various sorts of health potions or status cures for things like poison, which, as of now, aren't much of a threat to you. The world you've returned to is overflowing with greedy bandits, shambling undead, and giant monstrosities who want to send you back across the Styx. Alone, most enemies are simple fodder, but in groups they provide more than a little resistance. Some enemies actually use their numbers to explicit advantage, unleashing tag team moves to attempt to throw you off your game. If you don't have the numbers advantage, the notable evasiveness of the enemy AI often finds them backing away from you long enough to recruit allies from nearby camps. On occasion, they don't even have to do that because engaging with some groups of enemies seemingly triggers aggro from off-screen camps. In short, what appears to be a manageable encounter can turn into an overwhelming mess in the blink of an eye. On the other hand, there are some, like archers, who just stand in groups and spam normal shots from a distance that chip away at your health and stamina on block. They're more annoying than challenging. Bosses largely fit into that mold as well. There's a half dozen or so standing between you and the end of the early access content, but really only one, the Skeleton King, stands out as a challenge outside of being a bigger version of a normal monster. Meanwhile, Achilles' tools for combat aren't much to write home about. Light and heavy attacks can be chained into combos, the length of which is limited by the amount of stamina you have. They lack a bit of impact though. At times it feels like Achilles just waves a blade around in the air, and then enemies fall over around him. I wish a solid blow landing on a foe felt meatier more often. There's a template for this within Legends Untold. Adding a run or dash modifies basic attacks into more stylish and powerful moves, including that fancy jumping sword one that Brad Pitt made famous in 2004's Troy. Getting some of these unique attacks to hit reliably can be a pain though, as it seems like enemy hitboxes are more of a suggestion than a rule. As you'd expect for a game in the Diablo mold, you can unlock special abilities via a constellation-shaped ability tree as you level up. An item lets you throw your shield early on, but you get things like parries and a weird stealth drain attack that allows you to suck life force from unsuspecting enemies from a distance, Legacy of Kain style. Those have the potential to mix combat up, but progression could use a rework because right now, unlocking the cool stuff takes a pretty serious investment of this resource to get around the web of points on the various star charts, with lots of upgrading of uninteresting passive skills necessary to get to the next big active skill. So, you can expect to spend a lot of time with what you have before you'll get an opportunity to try something new. It should also be noted that right now, Legends Untold is buggier than the average early access game. Almost everything about it is currently janky in some form. Enemy AI is prone to failure, invisible walls sometimes close you off from returning to areas you were just in, the lock-on system frequently ignores enemies within stabbing distance in favor of ones that are off-screen, sound drops out from cutscenes, and, you guessed it, more. Again, it's early access, but the price to play Achilles isn't just cash, it's sometimes a Sisyphean test of your patience. There's no reason that, in a good amount of time, Achilles Legends Untold couldn't turn into an action RPG of mythological proportions. The fundamentals are all in place, including a decent idea for a story, but all you get when you buy into its early access version is mundane combat, an empty world, and a by-the-numbers plot, all of which are a Trojan Horse for a load of bugs and glitches so heavy even Atlas couldn't lift them. For more, check out our reviews of Salt and Sacrifice and Rogue Legacy 2. And, for everything else, stick with IGN.